Hello everyone, back to today's second video. So we've already done the 5-day forecast. You can find the video tag here on the home page. Just scroll down the page a little bit and it is above the snow desk, which has just been added to the home page in place of pollen count. No need to have pollen count now, of course, because pollen season is well and truly done and dusted until next spring. So in the place of pollen count, we have got now the snow desk that'll be running through the autumn and winter season. So have a look at 5D forecast if you'd like to do that. Also written version, you get to have the buttons at the top of the page. Looking out for Storm Brian coming up over the weekend on Saturday. So check out 5-day forecast for more on that. This video is going to extend out beyond the 7 to 10 day time frame, beyond the 5-day time frame to the 7 to 10 day time frame. And we'll also have a look at the CFSV2 for next month. We would usually on a Wednesday look at the Beijing Climate Centre for the next 40 days, but unfortunately the Beijing Climate Centre website has been taken offline today. Not sure what's going on there. We're doing some maintenance, I would have thought. So in place of Beijing Climate Centre, have a look at CFSV2. So again, with all of that for you right now. We're going to begin with all of the ensembles data, and we're starting with the upper air temperatures and precipitation ensembles today. We're looking at Oldham today. Somebody's asked us to have a look at the ensembles for Oldham. So red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average in Oldham at this time of the year. And we are actually above average at the moment. It's warmer than average right now. Going to cool off over weekend. Going to be a fairly chilly weekend. But then next week, looks like it's going mild and average again. Did the video yesterday speculating that the rest of October might be quite mild. And that's certainly the way this ensemble chart is looking at the moment. This is going to the 1st of November just there, and you'll notice even then it does look as though it could be a little bit above the 30-year temperature average above this red line. So quite a mild period coming up, other than a couple of colder days over the weekend. In terms of precipitation, we've got lots of rainfall spikes coming up as well in Oldham, and this is pretty indicative of most parts of the country. There's going to be quite a lot of rain coming up in the next week, certainly. And really, the precipitation spikes extending out into the final stages of the month and going into the start of November as well. It does look as though we're going to be in for quite an unsettled time of it. Have a look at the surface temperature and air pressure for Oldham next. So dealing with surface temperatures first of all. So we're actually quite cool today, even though the upper air temperatures are fairly mild. It's a dull, dank sort of day across much of the country. That does make a difference at this time of year. So that's 10 Celsius just there. That's 15 Celsius there. And we are under 15 Celsius today. Excuse me. Now, as we run out towards the weekend, actually we get a little bit more of a cooling trend going into the weekend. So we go down to maximums of around 10 Celsius at best over the weekend, this period just here. But next week looks as though temperatures are lifting up a little bit, going back up towards maybe 15 degrees Celsius. Before perhaps later on a little bit of a cooling trend coming along. That's more evident at night. This is 0 degrees just here. And that sort of frost level. You'll notice that for the next week, looks like we'll be staying mostly frost-free. But as we get through to the final days of October and into the start of November as well, we have got several ensemble members then beginning to go down to frost levels. So we may well start to see some colder nights coming up at the very end of October, start of November. That might be associated with a little bit of a build in pressure. This is how the air pressure is looking for the next couple of weeks in Oldham. So starting at around 1,010 millibars. We dropped down to 990 millibars over the weekend. That's Storm Brian, of course. Check out 5D forecast for more on that. And then a recovery in air pressure taking place through to the final days of October into the start of November. You'll notice there is a lot of scatter, however, within this period. So we have got some ensemble members that are very, very low with the pressure here right at the end of October into the start of November. These are storms, I would have thought, coming in from off the Atlantic Ocean. They're outlier members, but they are there. So a few ensemble members bringing very low pressure. But most of the ensemble members are actually raising pressure in the final days of October into the start of November. I suspect that is the favoured option, the high pressure to build back in at the end of the month and into the start of November, possibly bringing, particularly at night, some colder, misty, foggy weather perhaps for the end of the month. Temperature anomalies are looking like this, so warmer than average across virtually the whole of Europe. Really, British Isles is included in that. So anomalies for us around 2 degrees above average, but eastern and southern parts of Europe, southeastern of Europe, coming out with temperature anomalies up to 6 to 8 degrees above average. It is a mild scene across much of the continent in the week ahead. Precipitation anomalies look wetter than average in the north and west of the UK, a little bit drier than average in the southeast. Over in America, it's a very mild scene for the next week. This is from the 18th, 26th of October. Temperature anomalies are coming out mild and average pretty much at all parts of the United States of America in the week ahead. Precipitation anomalies looks very dry out in the west, but is a little bit wetter in the southeast. So this is the GFS for the weekend then, and we've got quite a deep area of low pressure just leaving eastern parts of Scotland on Sunday morning. That is what's left of Storm Brian, which will give us a battering on Friday night and into Saturday. We go through into Monday, and high pressure is trying to build to the south. Also got a bit of high pressure over Scandinavia. This very deep area of low pressure in the Atlantic. That looks proper messy. But what happens is that this low pressure sort of stalls in the middle of the Atlantic and allows heights to rise to the south and the east of the UK. So by the middle of next week, actually, we are seeing a high pressure taking over, and this time the high pressure is becoming centred over Scandinavia. So this is trying to back the winds into the east through the middle part of next week. What actually happens is that high pressure sort of sticks around parts of Finland and going back into western Russia, brings in more of a southeasterly flow from off the continent, and low pressure never too far away either. So this high pressure never really gets in through the course of next week, other than maybe a few dry days in the middle part of the week. That's how we finish up on day 10 with low pressure moving back in from off the Atlantic, and that's going to slide southwards then as we go just a little bit beyond day 10. That low pressure is sliding south and becoming cut off down across France and Spain by the time you go through to the 30th of October, which is probably allowing cooler winds to come in from the north and northeast. That might be our opportunity, maybe, for our first sort of air frost of season. Just go back and have a look at that again, because it is quite unusual to see low pressure doing that. So this is where it is on Friday, just there, this area of low pressure around Iceland. We've got high pressure back here and also the high pressure over there. Keep an eye on that low pressure. We go through 24 hours to Saturday the 28th. And this is the low pressure position, the main centre of it just there, but it is sort of elongating across the west of Europe. So by the time you go through to Sunday 29th of October, the low pressure is actually sliding away to our south. So the low pressure has done something like that in its position and its movement, which is quite unusual for low pressure to do that. And when you start seeing low pressures diving southwards out of Iceland like that, and then going down to southern Europe eventually, that's where it finishes up into southern parts of Europe. When you see low pressure doing that, it can be one of the signs that the atmosphere is beginning to behave just a little bit abnormally, because usually low pressure will be centering itself, at this time of year anyway, around Greenland and Iceland. So when you see low pressure breaking away from Iceland like that and slipping south and becoming cut off across southern Europe, can be one of the signs that the atmosphere is starting to behave a little bit differently. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent with that. Let's come back to the next week, 10 days. This is the ECM WF. So we're at Sunday, 22nd of October. That's Storm Brian in the North Sea at midnight on Sunday, beginning to move away to our east. And then we go through the early part of next week with heights rising to the south and the east, low pressure out to west, so a real sort of messy pattern setting up early next week with high pressure to the east and south, low pressure to the north and the west. We go up towards day 10. This is Thursday, 26th of October, with this low pressure becoming stuck in the Atlantic. Pressure's rising to the north and to the east of the country, dragging the winds up from a southerly southeasterly direction, so it's likely to be quite mild. But as we progress out to day 10, which is Saturday, 28th of October, high pressure has well and truly taken over there. The centre of it is over Norway and into Sweden just there, but it is also sending a ridge up towards Greenland and Iceland. This low pressure, it is becoming cut off, but it's becoming cut off more towards the Azores. Now, the upshot of this is that we're bringing the winds in from a southerly to southeasterly direction. So it's not cold with the flow. However, it is coming in from off the continental landmass. And at this time of year, it's a cooling time of year on the continent, might be enough, at very least, to start producing some dense patches of mist and fog. But by day, probably still pleasantly mild. Finally, just having a look at the charts from the CFS V2 for the next month. So we've got the 500 height anomalies here broken down to week periods. First week period taking us from the 18th, 24th of October. Just a reminder, we aren't using the Bayesian Climate Centre today because the website seems to be down for some reason. So we find that we've got above average heights in the week ahead to our south, below average heights to the north, doing something like that, and also above average heights with a bit of blocking up there, really messy with the scenario, doing something a bit like that with the flow and with jet stream in the week ahead. We go through to week 2, which is the 25th to 31st of October. We've got heights rising to our south and the east. Low pressure is becoming cut off to the south with a ridge over there. So doing something a bit like that with the flow and with the jet stream. Now, that does place on the mild side of the jet, but because it's nearly November now, long nights, of course, with a ridge close to us, we might have to start thinking about mist, fog, and possibly even some frost with that kind of situation. This continues through the first week of November. This is the 1st through to 7th of November, when we have above average heights centering across the majority of Central and Northern Europe. Low pressure is up there, and we do something like that with the flow with the jet stream. You would expect some quite cold nights, mist and fog, maybe some frost to be in with that. And then finally, week 4 rounds it all off, all looking very anticyclonic. This is the 8th to 14th of November. High pressure now is, let's get rid of that and start again. So high pressure now is sort of centering around Denmark, and again that's bringing the air in probably from a south-southeasterly direction. We've got low pressure out here, and it would depend on the very exact nature of the air mass as to whether that's relatively mild or whether it could be cold. But the further into November we go, when we see high pressure appearing in that sort of position, the further into November we go, even though the model will be looking at that and thinking it's mild, the further into November we go, the more we have to think certainly about frost at night, mist and fog as well. All depends on whether you get an inversion or not. The model looks primarily at the upper air temperatures and decides that it's going to be mild on the surface. But in November, under high pressure, the same is true when you get into winter. At this point of the year, under high pressure, even though it may be mild aloft, the upper air temperatures might be mild down on the surface as the heat radiates out into space. Particularly if you get mist and fog forming under these ridges, it can actually get quite cold. Some people refer to this as faux cold or fake cold, but really cold is cold, and frost is frost, whether it happens from an easterly from Siberia or whether it happens via an inversion under a mild ridge with upper air temperatures quite warm. Right, so that's it, and that's today's video done and dusted. Essentially, for the next week to 10 days, we're looking at unsettled weather for the rest of this week into weekend, probably through to start of next week. Up to middle part of next week, I think we may get a couple of drier days, and then beyond that, the weather pattern's getting rather unusual, with the idea that we get some sort of diving low pressure moving down from Iceland, probably bringing a fair amount of rain in the second half of next week, before it turns drier and cooler perhaps for the closing days of October. Come back tomorrow for the next instalment. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.